To pass, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teachings.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. Dana being a Pali word, that means generosity or to give freely. And this is done without expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis, and you can support their practice by giving what you can. So you can go to greattreetemple.org, and on the upper right side, there's a giving tab where you can donate to our speaker today. And our speaker today is our Alice, Rev Teijo Munnich. Daiju Teijo means Great Tree Right Stillness. Rev Teijo is a disciple and Dharma heir of Rev Dainin Katagiri. She studied with him from 1975 until his death in 1990, receiving formal training at Hokyoji in Minnesota, Tassajara Zen Mountain Center in California, and Hosshinji Sodo in Obama, Japan. Rev Munnich was ordained as a Zen priest in 1981. In 1983, she began to envision a practice center and community, and at its heart, a residential practice for women, which came to be Great Tree Zen Women's Temple. The title of her talk today is One Drop of Dew Moistens 1,000 Mountains. Let me actually mute the texts.
What did that do?
It turns your text
Oh,
off.
thank you.
So good ding. It's a good ding.
Good morning. So this kind of came up a couple of weeks ago when I was writing an article for the newsletter. This one drop of dew moistens 1,000 mountains. It's very interesting because originally I heard this verse or heard this line because my teacher at the monastery gave me a raksu, a little Buddha robe he wrote that on the back of it. One drop of dew moistens 1,000 mountains. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, in the sense of, I got it, But then, and then a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about when I was writing for the newsletter that we're about to send out, and I was thinking about the mountain seed ceremony and the bubbles. And the bubbles, we didn't really do a very clear explanation of the bubbles because there was no narration that was written for it because it started here. It was that actually sort of my idea. But I was thinking about how it's like giving back the merit. May the merit of this penetrating to each thing in all places. So that kind of, it's called dissemination of the Dharma in Buddhism. I don't like that word dissemination. It sounds too much like trying to convert people, but but it's a very commonly used term in at least in the Soto Zen world, because and probably in Buddhism in general, because there is this sense of sharing and of recognizing that interdependent relationship that we live within. So this, but when I was thinking about this, about talking about this, I thought, I don't know what to say, because it's just sort of a sense, just sort of I get how that works kind of feeling. One drop of dew being the Dharma, or not the Dharma as such, but the experience of being awake to truth. What's often called these days getting in the flow. But in Zazen, it seems like my students at Warren Wilson used to say to me, well, why do we have to meditate? Because we know how to get in the flow. You know, I mean, we've been in the flow. I said, yeah, but do you know how you got there? And I think for me, before I got into Zazen practice, I had those experiences of just things just flowing, you know, and then other times when they just weren't. But I didn't know exactly how I got there. And somehow Zazen, as Dogen Zenji says in the Fukanza Zengi, is a backward step that turns the light inwardly to illuminate what is called the self or all beings. Our relation, that self is the interdependent life that we are within, that human life is part of. So I was trying to think about how this works, and it reminded me of a story. I think it's the introduction to the Vimalakirti Sutra, but probably this is in other sutras as well. So I'm not sure. But the Buddha is standing before the assembly, and he goes into this kind of what's the word? Altered state, or into this state of emptiness, the state of just being present. And and of course it really affects everybody that's there. And so they immediately have that same experience there. So just looking at him evokes this kind of experience. And then he stops and they all, you know, like drop into the ground. And they were like, why did you do that? We want to be there. We like that. Why don't you just keep us there? And he, you know, his answer was something like, well, you got to do it yourself. You got to learn how to do this yourself. And I was thinking about that experience. I remember the very first time I led, it was an all-day sitting, and it was in Omaha. And I was freshly back from the monastery, pretty much. And I remember this group was, the Omaha group has been around for 50 years, but the Nebraska Zen Center, but it's changed. I've seen at least 4 different groups of people because they haven't had a consistent teacher. So at that time I was going and they were saying, oh, you know, come to Omaha, be our teacher. And I was like, well, I'm not so sure about coming to Omaha, but you know, I can keep helping you here. And so we planned this all day sitting, and it was almost all people who were new to the practice. There were probably 30 people there. And I remember sitting up there really realizing that they were kind of looking to me to hold this energy together. And you know, a lot of different kinds of stuff comes up for everyone when you're sitting. You know, and you've got a group and you're sitting for a day. There's just a lot of energy. Some of it is positive, some of it is negative. Whatever's happening in your life kind of comes up. And I think without realizing it, that when something distressing came up for me when I was sitting in Minnesota Zen Center, that I think what came up was, oh, I'll talk to Roshi about this. So realizing later that he actually was holding the space, you know, he was actually giving us a sense of kind of, I think, what the Buddha was doing in this introduction in Hokyoji Sutra, kind of not getting caught by that craziness that exists in most of our lives, and which he, as a human being, was very vulnerable to, but he knew how to kind of step back, take that backward step. And something that we learn really through meditation. I'm still not so good at that, but I'm better at it than I was 50 years ago. So there is a learning curve there. But, so there is that sense of, to me, of being able to just, this, I had an interesting insight around this, or an interesting thought. Katagiri Roshi sent me a postcard one year for New Year's, and it said something like dragon drool. So I was thinking about that just this morning, and I thought, oh, I was thinking it was dragon dew, and I thought, oh, I should go back and dig that out. I know I've got it in my files somewhere, but I wasn't able to find it. But when I was looking for it, I thought, wait, it wasn't dragon dew, it was dragon drool. So then I thought, well, what's the difference between dragon dew and dragon drool? And the internet isn't too helpful in understanding this from the Buddhist perspective. But they did give some interesting thoughts about it, partly coming from China. And I just want to share with you a few of these ideas about dragon dew. Dragon dew as a metaphor in Zen meditation, a master spoke of a dragon flying into his seventh house, followed by a torrent of rain, which is a metaphor for a powerful but ultimately transient experience in deep meditative concentration. So this dragon image anyway has been very interesting to me recently because of Teijo McMullen's talk about the dragon spirit that circles the temple and keeps the spirit alive, and spirit of the Dharma, the spirit of truth alive. And he tells this one story about this this monk that he met when he was doing the pilgrimage around Shikoku, and he said this monk they met and he invited him to their temple, and the temple wasn't one of the temples on pilgrimage, but it was off kind of nearby and off the beaten track, and so he invited them to rest there for a few days, and he gave them meals and things. They were pretty tired, so they took him up on that, and they were talking about it. And this monk told them that the reason that he had come to this mountain was to restore the dragon, to bring the spirit of the mountain back to life, because it had been neglected and gone to disrepair. And so he was not in the Zen tradition. He was in another tradition where they have kind of this more of a sense of this kind of these spirits. And his practice, he had to go around to various places and make offerings and things like that. But just this idea of, and this is also in Soto Zen, and this was brought up in the context of this mountain seat ceremony that we did, the spirit of the practice being kept alive, and that as long as kind of the dragon is recognized and recognized, really, to recognize that we awaken to that the spirit of the practice that really comes up in Zazen. And when I was looking at dragon drool, I found it interesting. Here it is, which have intertwined with local Buddhist traditions. Dragon saliva is in general mythology, dragon saliva was considered a valuable substance and used in perfumes or marking jade and gold statues. A more symbolic meaning is the idea of true dragon as a metaphor for the raw, powerful, and sometimes hidden forces of the mind that are unearthed through meditation. The raw, powerful, and sometimes hidden forces of the mind that are unearthed through meditation. This isn't something that Zen emphasizes, but in fact, it's true. It's so interesting. We talked about faith last practice period because Genjo was thinking about that a lot, and thinking how do you cultivate faith and what is faith and everything. And I was telling him, when we get into a bind, we'd say, oh, how do we resolve this? Some kind of logistical thing. We would just say, well, let's just put it out there and maybe, something will manifest. And it seemed to happen quite often. And the other day I was visiting an inmate at one of the prisons, and he had said, we need a bell for meditation, because he's kind of leading a meditation group at this prison. And so I said, well, I'll see what we've got. And what I found in our craft sale was some of those Tibetan they look like little symbols.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to kind of bring them this way. And so the other day when I was visiting, we were chanting and we were trying to ring the bells, and he was saying it's hard to, what did he say? I can't remember, but it was hard to use the bells in that way. So he said, we need one of those small round bells. And I said, well, I don't think we've got one at Zen Center, but well, let's just put it out there. And the next day we got a letter, an email from somebody offering us, among other things, one of those bells. So this is what I was kind of connecting with when it talks about how powerful and sometimes hidden forces of the mind that are unearthed through meditation. It sounds like powerful and hidden forces, but they're only hidden because we don't believe in them, And meditation, he says, unearthed through meditation. They unearth this ability, really, all it is really is the truth of being present. This is what Buddha was able to do, I think. And he brought his disciples right into the present. He brought, well, the assembly, I don't know, it probably wasn't just his disciples, but probably people that just showed up for the talk. He let go of all of the stuff that his mind was doing. He was able to let go of that and just be present in. And this is the thing I think I found about Katagiri Roshi too, that he had that ability to do that. As he points out in here, though, this is not something, it's a transient kind of thing. It's not something that, it's not a place where we kind of stay, maybe when we die. So that's the drool. So the dew is more of a single drop of dew. This is one of the things I found on the internet. Even a single drop of dew can contribute to the moisture of an entire ecosystem. And really, I always talk about life itself is everythingness kind of changing and exchanging and rearranging, and if you can even for a moment kind of glimpse that that experience that of that oneness, that we are a part of all of that we are doing and part of this exchange and rearrange, and not get stuck in everything that human life draws us to attach to as real. If we can just recognize that constant movement. Of course, easier said than done, but I think this idea of one drop of dew having that kind of effect really points to the fact that any one of us, when we are in that moment of awakening that Dogen Zenji points out, is always, every time we sit down, that happens. Every one of us can have this kind of experience of moistening 1,000 mountains just through sitting down and shutting up. And we can also do that in our everyday lives by the process that we kind of learn And it's a process of that backward step, which is a kind of, well, it is a letting go. But of course, letting go isn't something, as I always say, isn't something we can make ourselves do. So, what does it mean? But Zazen teaches us that. And at first, we don't recognize it as letting go, but as I used to say when people, in the early days, when people would say, why do you do that? Why do you do that meditation? Because none of my other friends did meditation at that time. Why do you do that? And I'd say, I don't know, but when I get up, I feel different. And even when I would sit for 3 or 5 minutes, I talk about this often, I would be in the angst of my failed relationship, and even that, I would stand up and I would feel just a little of the edge was taken off. There was still quite a bit of stuff there, but so that is, that is what meditation is the experience of that. It's not something, it's the experience of letting go. I mean, I always say that just to sit down and look at a wall, anything as stupid as that, you have to let go of something. And it is a stupid thing. And I mean, most of us have probably had the experience of at one time or another saying, why am I sitting here doing nothing? There's so much to do. I know that happened to me in the early days, especially. Now I sort of see that that's just my mind trying to escape the things that are coming up that I don't like to see. But so anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm sorry, I'm not very, I couldn't kind of figure out how to talk about this, even though every time I think about this one drop of dew, I think, oh, okay, we don't have to do a lot. Just take that one step. I would say one step beyond resistance is awakening. Because when we take that step beyond resistance, we're letting go. So that's all I have to say. So we got lots of time to talk. Anybody got anything else?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me of just the idea that, when you help one person or one being, you help the whole universe. And these, I think what you were describing at the beginning is kind of like intuitive knowledge that this is true. I mean, it's not something you can explain, but you intuitively know it's truth. And that could be called faith, I suppose. That I mean, it's saying something that could be quite ridiculous, but still, we sort of we believe it. I mean, not only we believe it, we sort of know it. We know it somehow from our experience or our practice. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. And trusting that, is where I think that's letting go. Really trusting. That faith is letting go, isn't it? Any other thoughts about that?
I just have kind of like a visual thought about how like a drop of dew can reflect a lot too. Like it could reflect a mountain range or like just a big picture or like everything that it is around, kind of like the whole entire sky or something, and it's small but it can kind of reflect lots too. And that was just like something that came to mind.
Did you
Like
hear
an
that?
image that came to mind when you were talking.
You can hear her. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because it sort of, for me, it sort of brings up the net of Indra, which is a description of interdependence. And you know how there's a jewel at each knot and all the jewels reflect each other. And I was thinking that for me, it would work better if somebody would have said a drop of dew instead of a jewel, because a jewel has kind of a fixed feeling, whereas a drop of has more of the impermanent sense. Yeah. And the thing about the bubbles too, that usually the ceremony is not bubbles. That's why I say this was the first one. The ceremony is these books, it's stacks and stacks of those kind of Japanese books, and you fan them, and it's the whole body of the Heart Sutra from China. The Heart Sutra that we chant is a abbreviated version that developed the original is from India, but the smaller one developed in China. But so in Japan, for a ceremony, at the end of a ceremony, they fan these Heart Sutras, kind of giving it out, sharing. It's called disseminating the Dharma. And so I was using the bubbles, and the bubbles really have a nice sense of the dew, I think, going out. They burst, they're impermanent, but then it creates this path with no trace, kind of. I feel like it kept on going beyond the bubbles.
I've been reading some haiku, and the drop of dew comes up quite a bit in Japanese haiku, and a lot of times it's used as a representation of impermanence and transience, and just how the fleeting nature of the world. And then in thinking about the bubbles too, and the Vimalakirti Sutra, the bubbles too are used to represent that, just that ever-changing nature of things. So 1 second it's there, and the next second it's gone. And so it kind of takes me back to this idea that really all there is this moment. There's there's really no before or after the bubble or dew. There's just the bubble and the dew. So that's where where my head goes.
And when my sister died suddenly, one of my Dharma brothers sent me a verse by this, I don't know, maybe a monk named Issa, ISSA, and apparently had lost his daughter suddenly, and he wrote this verse: "The world of dew is the world of dew, and yet, and that kind of, it kind of even shows the impermanence of impermanence, and it just struck me so much because, I remember when I came back from her funeral, I had some time. We had just Zen Center of Asheville had just started. It wasn't really up and running yet. So I had some kind of time to just process it. And I remember thinking, this is a perfect opportunity to really experience impermanence. And yet, in the next moment, I would just be pouring out with tears, just weeping. But that impermanence is impermanent.
Right. Yeah, it's like with the bubble, they're so beautiful, and there's something to me like bubbles and dew, like I know it's gonna burst. I know it's not gonna last, and yet, there's something that's I get fixated on it still. We can still kind of enjoy the beauty or get wrapped up in it.
It's interesting because everybody likes bubble stuff. I've liked them since I was a little kid. And so you take out the bubbles and everybody's on it,
When you brought up the dew image, I initially thought of a different side of interdependence, which was just like the water cycle being like that one drop of dew, like you call it that one drop, but really that water is like part of the clouds, part of the rivers, and like that runs, the ice that runs down the mountain that makes the rivers. It's like that's also that drop of dew. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, really. You know, and it's something that, you know, it's sort of, you're talking about it sort of scientifically, but it's still in our imagination, you know. But still having that kind of that cycle. Yeah. There was a book I read when I was in my 20s by somebody by the name of Tom Wolfe, and it's not the same as Thomas Wolfe. It's a different Tom Wolfe. And I think he only wrote one book, maybe he wrote more, but he had this character in there called Amanda. And Amanda came to the conclusion that humans were created, that water was the main energy in the universe, and that humans were created just to move water from one place to another. And it gave me a whole different perspective on water, because, you know, what you were talking about, that cycle, I mean, it's always present in some way, in some form.
I like thinking about sort of the suchness of dew and water cycle, and kind of like, it seems like there's no way for the dew not to moisten the mountain. And it kind of makes me think of like, it's sort of like the paradox of like, yeah, when I sit and I look at the wall, like there is a realization. And it's like, I can't argue with that. Just like you can't argue with the dew moistening the mountain. Like there's no wrong way for it to happen.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of thinking about, well, I don't know if I was thinking about that, but maybe I was, with like, you know, you were sort of drawing a line between that and sitting, and just like when you sit, like that is that letting go and that, you know, impermanence. But sometimes I feel like maybe it's just an insecurity, but when I'm sitting, sometimes I feel like I'm not really sitting. I feel like I'm not really there. I'm not actually meditating. I'm like doing something else. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. There's actually a wrong way to do it. But you know, I don't know. It's like, then I'm in my head. I don't even know. So yeah, sometimes it feels like the meditation that I'm doing is not really meditation, but I don't know what else it would be.
Because as Katagiri Roshi said, no one knows what Shikantaza is. It's really, you know, when you were talking, I was thinking about how the letting go is when we really notice what our mind is obsessing about at that moment, or when our mind is grasping onto at that moment. When we notice it, that is letting go. And I think that those moments when you think you're not meditating, you're not doing anything, I think it's really when we're in that. I mean, you don't notice it till afterwards, but I think those moments are really, that is really being in the present. Because as Dogen says in the Bendowa, he says, even though, you know, at the moment of awakening, the experience of walls and fences and grasses and everything's expounding the Dharma, you don't recognize this with the conscious mind. You know? And I said to Katagiri Roshi, well, is this something you can sort of recognize in retrospect? And he said, yes. And I mean, it was very clear about it. And I thought, yeah, because that I think we do. That's the only way we can know it. And I remember when I was reading Universe in a Single Atom, where the Dalai Lama is talking about how, you know, scientists should practice a spiritual path, and monks should study science, you know, because they both contribute something, you know. And so he's talking about scientific investigation, and I thought, yeah, I know what that is, you know, you isolate variables. And then he was talking about spiritual investigation. I said, well, what is that? And then I finally came to the conclusion that that's Zazen, because you're really eliminating, you know, your all sense experiences, except your mind. Your mind is still active. But that over time you start to realize what that um what the um what is that moment is, you start to recognize what that experience is, I should say, what that experience of letting go is. You start to recognize it, and you don't start judging, you stop judging as that wasn't real. Do you know what I mean? You start saying, oh, because that's what we do. I realized this a long time ago. The first thing we do when we have an experience is we judge, was that real or wasn't that real? And we judge it according to what we already know. We say, does it fit into what I already understand? And this experience does not fit into that. But after we've had it for a while, then we start to recognize, maybe that is a real experience. Does that make sense? I'm kind of all over the place and trying to explain it, but
I mean, that's where the faith comes into of like faith in that experience. Like, whereas instead of rejecting it or saying, well, this doesn't fit into my kind of understanding of things, it becomes a acceptance in a way.
yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to put it.
Yeah, I think that is what praise is.
I really like that phrase as I think I hear the idea of non-conceptual meditation often, and not in Zen context, but in Tibetan context.
Mm.
And I feel like what you just said to me helps me recognize it differently, where I often find myself thinking, well, like what could non-conceptual
Right.
experience be?
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, the idea that just you're judging it based on what you know, but it doesn't fit into that ever, actually feels it's much clearer to me.
It's interesting to me too, because it's like we have to ask the question, even though we can't come up with the answer, an answer, but asking the question sort of takes us in the direction of it. And then when we say, oh, like what you just were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Thank you all. Okay, we can finish.
May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
I do have a few announcements to make. So tomorrow is going to be family meditation, which is available in person or on Zoom. And then there's going to be a full moon gathering on this upcoming Thursday, December 4th, which starts at 7 p.m. And then on December 5th through 10th, that's going to be Rohatsu Sesshin. And so you can join for 3 days or 5 days. And so registration is still open. So you can email me if you want to know more. So info@greattreetemple.org. And then also I just want to tell people to keep an eye out for the newsletter that'll be coming out hopefully this upcoming week. Because there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff in there, including like a photo spread from the mountain seat ceremony. There's going to be information about raising funds, and then there's also going to be information about receiving the precepts this upcoming year, which involves like sewing a raksu and doing a precept ceremony here as well. So if you're interested in any of that, you can email me at the same email address. And then the speaker for next weekend will be, it looks like it is Teijo again. And the title of her talk will be Peaceful Dwelling and Constant Walking.
That's because I couldn't find anybody to do it.
Well, you have it.
Okay.
And Buddha's enlightenment
Oh, yes.
celebration.
Yeah, so that'll be at Urban Dharma on December 14th. So there'll be a Buddha's Enlightenment celebration and a bake sale. And that'll be at Urban Dharma, which is on Haywood from 2 to 4 p.m.
Yes, come.
Come, bring some things to sell.
Yeah, 2 to 4.
Besock? Is that Besock?
No, we saw
Something else.
Buddhism, like okay, let me just explain. In at least in the Zen tradition, or maybe in the whole Japanese tradition, they celebrate all of the events that happened in Buddha's life, his birth, his enlightenment, and his death in nirvana. They separate all. Whereas in Theravadan traditions and Tibetan tradition does this too. They celebrate them all on the same day, and it's called Wesak or Vesak. And so we do that because Dr. Lai likes to do it. And we started doing it because Robert Wooten started doing it. So that's kind of a we all get together kind of thing. But we still celebrate in the Zen tradition all these separate ones. So this upcoming sesshin is called Rohatsu, and Buddhists all over, at least all over Japan, are doing it on these same days going up to December 8th, which is considered Buddha's Enlightenment Day. We don't know the exact date, but anyway, so that we celebrate it every year. It's around the holiday, and we usually have a craft sale, but we don't have very many crafts right now, so we're gonna have a bake sale. So if you're local and you're going to a party, you can pick up some goodies to take to your party, and you don't have to be baking at home. Or you can bake and bring some to sell. So it's kind of a fundraiser. Okay? Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.